The wagon wheels creaked to a halt at the narrow mountain pass, where three men waited with rifles across their saddles. And Zara Morgan knew in that moment. Her father was about to make a choice that would shatter everything she thought she knew about love and family. Her father, Edmund Morgan, had been sweating for hours as they approached the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in the New Mexico territory, and Zara had attributed it to the August heat of 1878. Now she understood it was something far worse. The men blocking the pass were rough characters, their faces weathered by sun and violence, their eyes calculating as they looked over the wagon and its passengers. "You got payment for crossing our territory?" the leader asked, a man with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. Edmund's hands trembled on the reins. "I have some money, not much, but enough for passage." The scarred man laughed, a sound like gravel scraping metal. "Money? We got plenty of money from the last 3 wagons we robbed. We are looking for something more interesting." Zara felt her stomach turn cold. Her younger brother, Thomas, pressed against her side, only 10 years old and already sensing danger. She put her arm around him, trying to appear brave even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "I have nothing else," Edmund said, but his voice cracked and Zara heard the lie in it. The scarred man walked his horse closer, studying them with dark eyes that lingered on Zara. She was 20 years old, with dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders and green eyes that her mother used to say were like spring grass. Her mother had died 2 years ago, and since then, Edmund had been different, harder, more desperate. They were traveling from Santa Fe to California, chasing rumors of opportunity, leaving behind debts and broken promises. "That girl there," the scarred man said. "She would make fine company for a week or 2. Leave her with us, and you and the boy can pass through." Zara felt the words like a physical blow. "Papa, no." Edmund would not meet her eyes. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating in the mountain air. Thomas began to cry quietly. "Papa, please," Zara whispered, but she already saw the resignation in her father's slumped shoulders. "I am sorry, Zara," Edmund said, his voice barely audible. "I have to think of Thomas. He is just a boy. You are strong. You will survive this." "Papa." The word came out as a scream, raw and desperate, but Edmund was already climbing down from the wagon. The scarred man gestured to his companions, and rough hands pulled Zara from her seat. She fought, kicking and clawing, but they were too strong. Thomas sobbed her name over and over as Edmund took the reins again. "Papa, how could you?" Zara shouted as the wagon began moving. For one moment, Edmund looked back, tears streaming down his weathered face, but he did not stop. He did not turn around. He drove the wagon through the pass and disappeared around the bend, taking Thomas and any hope of rescue with him. The men tied Zara's hands and put her on a horse. They rode for hours through rough mountain trails until they reached a ramshackle camp hidden in a valley. There were other men there, and 2 other women who looked at Zara with hollow eyes that spoke of resignation and survival. "What is your name?" the scarred man asked as they pulled her down from the horse. "Zara," she said, lifting her chin. She would not let them see her break. "I am Dalton. You belong to me now until I decide otherwise." He said it casually, as if discussing the weather. Zara spent 3 days in that camp. She refused to eat at first, refused to speak, but survival instinct eventually won out. The other women, Margaret and Lou, told her in whispered conversations that Dalton ran one of several outlaw groups that controlled the mountain passes. He sold passage to travelers for money, goods, or sometimes people. Women were often traded to other camps or kept as servants and worse. On the 4th morning, gunshots echoed through the valley. Zara sat up from the bedroll they had given her, heart racing. The camp erupted in chaos as men grabbed weapons and shouted warnings. Through the confusion, she saw riders approaching, at least a dozen of them, moving with purpose down the rocky slopes. The fight was brutal but short. Dalton's men were outnumbered and outgunned. When the smoke cleared, most of them were dead or fleeing into the wilderness. The scarred man himself lay in the dirt, a bullet through his chest, his eyes staring sightlessly at the sky. A tall cowboy dismounted near where the women huddled together. He wore dusty leather chaps over denim pants and a brown hat that shadowed his face. When he removed it, Zara saw he was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with light brown hair and blue eyes that held both strength and kindness. "Are you ladies all right?" he asked, his voice gentle despite the violence that had just occurred. Margaret spoke first, her voice shaking. "They took us. We did not come here willingly." The cowboy nodded, his jaw tight with anger. "I am Yates Hammond. We have been tracking this group for weeks. They killed a rancher and his son near Sierra Vista, Arizona, and took money meant for a land purchase." He looked at each woman in turn. "You are free now. Where are your families?" Lou began to cry. "I have no one. My husband died and I was traveling alone when they took me." Margaret said something similar. Her family had been killed in a raid months ago. When Yates looked at Zara, she felt something shift in her chest. His eyes were kind, genuinely concerned, and after days of cruelty and fear, that simple humanity nearly broke her. "My father traded me for passage through the mountains," she said, the words bitter on her tongue. "He and my brother went on to California without me." She saw the shock and disgust cross Yates's face. What kind of man does that to his own daughter? "Apparently the kind my father is," Zara said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Yates stood silent for a moment, then turned to his men. "Search the camp. Take any money or valuables you find. It is stolen anyway, and we will use it to help these ladies get somewhere safe." His men moved through the camp efficiently. They found lockboxes buried under bedrolls and hidden in supply crates. Coins, bills, jewelry, watches, all the takings from months of robbery and extortion. They piled it in the center of the camp. Yates counted it carefully, his expression growing more grim. "Over $8,000 here, plus goods worth at least another 1,000. He turned to the women. "This money was stolen from honest people, but most of them are dead now. The law in these parts is thin, and I doubt we could find the rightful owners for most of it. I propose we use it to give you ladies a fresh start. Margaret, Lou, is there somewhere you want to go? Someone who might take you in?" They discussed options. Lou had a sister in Denver. Margaret had distant cousins in Texas. Yates promised to arrange travel and provide them each with enough money to start over. Then he turned to Zara. "And you, do you have anywhere to go?" Zara thought about it. Her father had abandoned her. Her mother was dead. She had no other family, no friends waiting, no home to return to. The realization of her complete aloneness hit her like a wave. "I have nowhere," she admitted. "Nothing." Yates studied her for a long moment. "How much did your father owe for passage?" "I do not understand." "Dalton took you as payment for passage through the mountains. How much would that passage have cost in money?" Zara shook her head. "I do not know. Maybe $50. 100. Yates went to the pile of stolen money and counted out bills. He held them up. "I am buying you back from a dead man. Your debt, whatever it was, is paid. You are your own person now, beholden to no one." The gesture was symbolic but profound. Tears filled Zara's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Now," Yates said, his voice gentle, "I own a ranch outside Sierra Vista, Arizona. It is hard work but honest. I need help with cooking, mending, keeping the house. My sister used to do it, but she got married last year and moved to Tucson. If you want employment, you are welcome to come work for me. Fair wages, your own room, and respect. Nothing more than work, you have my word." Zara looked at this stranger who had freed her, who was offering her a future when she had thought she had none. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Yates said simply. "And because no one should be alone in this world the way you are right now." The journey to Sierra Vista took 5 days. Yates's men escorted Margaret and Lou to the nearest town with a stage line, providing them with money and protection until they were safely on their way. Then Yates and 3 of his ranch hands rode with Zara south into Arizona territory. They talked during those long days in the saddle. Yates told her about his ranch, the Hammond Ranch, which he had built with his father before a fever took the older man 3 years ago. He had 200 head of cattle, good grazing land, and a small house that needed a woman's touch. Zara told him about her life before, about growing up in Missouri before her mother died, about the slow collapse of her father's spirit after that loss. She told him about Thomas, her sweet little brother, and how her heart ached wondering if he was safe, if he thought of her, if he blamed her for being left behind. "It was not your fault," Yates said firmly when she expressed that fear. "Your father made a choice that no honorable man would make. That shame is his, not yours." They reached Sierra Vista in the late afternoon of the 5th day. The town was small but growing, with a main street of wooden buildings, a church with a white steeple, and houses spreading out toward the surrounding hills. The Hammond Ranch lay 3 miles outside town, nestled in a valley with a creek running through it. The house was larger than Zara expected, built of adobe and wood, with a covered porch that faced the mountains. Yates showed her inside, pointing out the kitchen, the sitting room, the bedrooms upstairs. "This will be your room," he said, opening a door to a small but clean space with a window overlooking the creek. "It has a good lock on the door, and I want you to use it. I know you have no reason to trust men right now, and I respect that." Zara set down her small bundle of possessions, everything she owned in the world. "Yates, I do not know how to repay you for this kindness. Just do good work and heal from what happened. That is payment enough." The first weeks at the ranch passed in a blur of activity. Zara threw herself into work, cleaning the house from top to bottom, mending clothes that had been neglected for months, cooking meals that filled the house with warmth and good smells. Yates's ranch hands, 3 men named Charlie, Robert, and Finn, treated her with respectful courtesy. They tipped their hats when they saw her, thanked her for meals, and never spoke out of turn. Yates himself was unfailingly kind but kept a proper distance. He worked from dawn until dusk, riding out to check cattle, mending fences, handling the endless tasks that kept a ranch running. In the evenings, he often sat on the porch, watching the sunset, and Zara began joining him there with coffee. "Tell me about your family," she said one evening, perhaps 6 weeks after arriving at the ranch. "My father came from Texas," Yates said, his voice thoughtful. "He fought in the war, then came west looking for a fresh start. Met my mother here, a school teacher from Philadelphia who came out to bring education to frontier children. They built this ranch together, raised me and my sister. Papa died 3 years ago from fever, and Mama followed him 6 months later. I think she died of a broken heart more than anything." "I am sorry," Zara said softly. "They had a good life together. That is more than many people get." He looked at her. "What about you? What do you want from life now?" Zara considered the question. A few months ago, she would have said she wanted security, a family, a normal life. Now those things seemed both more precious and more distant. "I want to never feel powerless again," she said finally. "I want to make my own choices. I want to matter to someone, not as a burden or a bargaining chip, but as a person." "You matter," Yates said quietly. "You matter to me." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Zara felt her heart skip, felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. As autumn arrived, painting the mountains in shades of gold and red, Zara realized she was falling in love with Yates Hammond. It happened gradually, in small moments. The way he always made sure she had enough firewood before a cold night. The way he asked her opinion on ranch decisions, valuing her thoughts. The way he smiled when he saw her in the morning, as if her presence made his day better. She tried to fight the feeling. She had known him only a few months. She was an employee in his house. She had no right to romantic feelings, no right to hope for more than the kindness he had already shown. But the heart does not listen to reason. One October evening, a storm rolled through the valley, bringing rain and wind that rattled the windows. Yates came in from securing the barn, soaked and shivering. Zara helped him out of his wet coat and pushed him toward the fireplace. "You will catch your death," she scolded, bringing him hot coffee and a blanket. "Worrying about me?" he asked, and there was something in his voice, something hopeful and uncertain. "Of course I am worried about you," Zara said. "You are important to me." Yates set down his coffee and stood, the blanket falling from his shoulders. "Zara, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond." Her heart began to race. "All right. I know you came here as an employee. I know you have every reason to be cautious around men after what your father did, after what Dalton and his men intended. But I cannot pretend anymore that you are just someone who works for me." He took a step closer. "You are the first person I think about in the morning and the last person I think about at night. You make this house a home. You make my life better in every way." "I am in love with you, Zara Morgan, and I have been for weeks now." Zara felt tears spring to her eyes. "Yates, I am falling in love with you too, but I am afraid. What if I am just confused? What if I am just grateful to you for saving me and I am mistaking that for something more?" "Are you confused right now?" Yates asked gently. "When you look at me, what do you feel?" Zara looked at him, really looked at him. She saw his kind eyes, his strong jaw, the way he stood before her offering his heart with no expectation of anything in return. She felt the warmth that spread through her whenever he was near, the way her day felt complete only when they talked in the evenings, the way she wanted to share every thought and fear and hope with him. "I feel like I have found home," she whispered. "I feel like you see me, the real me, and you value what you see. I feel safe with you, but also excited. I feel like I could build a life with you, a real life." Yates closed the distance between them and took her hands. "Then build that life with me, not as my employee, but as my partner. Marry me, Zara. Let me spend the rest of my days proving that you matter, that you are loved, that you are cherished." "Yes," Zara breathed. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, and Zara felt the last pieces of her broken heart begin to heal. They were married in November in the little church in Sierra Vista. The whole town turned out for the celebration, bringing food and gifts and good wishes. Charlie, Robert, and Finn stood as witnesses, grinning ear to ear. The preacher's wife cried happy tears during the ceremony. Zara wore a dress of blue silk that Yates had bought for her in Tucson, and she carried wildflowers that still bloomed in the protected valleys. When Yates slipped a simple gold band on her finger, she felt the weight of it like an anchor, something solid and real that could not be taken away. Their first year of marriage was filled with hard work and deep joy. Zara learned the rhythms of ranch life, learned to ride a horse well enough to help with cattle drives, learned to shoot a rifle for protection against predators, both animal and human. Yates taught her with patience, never making her feel foolish for not knowing things. In return, she made their house a true home. She planted a garden in the spring, growing vegetables and herbs and flowers. She sewed curtains for the windows and quilts for the beds. She learned to keep accounts and helped Yates manage the ranch finances, discovering she had a good head for numbers. But more than the practical partnership, they built an emotional intimacy that sustained them both. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. They laughed together and grieved together when Charlie's wife had a stillborn baby. They held each other through nightmares, Yates comforting Zara when she dreamed of her father's abandonment, Zara comforting Yates when he dreamed of his parents' deaths. One evening in late spring, Zara sat on the porch watching the sunset and felt a now familiar flutter in her belly. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had wanted to be certain before telling Yates. When he came up from the barn, she stood and took his hands. "I have something to tell you." He looked concerned. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right." She placed his hand on her stomach. "We are going to have a baby." The joy that lit up Yates's face was worth every moment of worry and fear she had carried. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, then set her down carefully as if she were made of glass. "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see he was. "Happy does not begin to cover it," he said. "You have given me everything, Zara. A home, a purpose, love, and now a family. I am the luckiest man alive." Their son was born in December, a few days before Christmas, after a long and difficult labor. Yates stayed with Zara the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement. When the midwife finally placed their baby in Zara's arms, she looked at his tiny face and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "What should we name him?" Yates asked, his voice full of wonder as he touched his son's tiny hand. "John," Zara said, "after your father." Yates's eyes filled with tears. Papa would have been so proud. Little John Hammond was a healthy, happy baby who filled the house with cries and laughter. Zara discovered she loved being a mother, loved watching her son grow and change, loved seeing Yates's gentle strength as he cradled their child. On a warm April day when John was 4 months old, a rider came up the road to the ranch. Zara was hanging laundry and did not recognize him at first. Then she saw the boy riding behind him on the saddle, and her heart stopped. Thomas, her brother, now 12 years old and taller than she remembered, slid off the horse and ran to her. She caught him in her arms, tears streaming down her face. "Zara, you are alive." "I told Papa you would be alive." She held him close, breathing in the little boy smell of him, feeling the solidity of his body. "I am alive, Thomas. I am more than alive." The rider dismounted, and Zara recognized him as the sheriff from Santa Fe. "Mrs. Hammond, I am Sheriff Carson. I have been looking for you for months." Yates came out of the barn, his expression protective. "What is this about?" Sheriff Carson removed his hat. "Edmund Morgan died 3 months ago. Fever took him in California. Before he passed, he made a confession to a priest about what he had done to his daughter. The priest contacted the law, and we have been trying to find you ever since to reunite you with your brother." Zara looked at Thomas, who was crying against her shoulder. "He is safe now. That is all that matters." "Your father left some money," the sheriff continued. "Not much, but enough to care for the boy. There is also a letter he wrote to you." Zara took the sealed envelope with shaking hands. That evening, after Thomas had met baby John and had dinner and been settled in a room of his own, she opened it. The letter was short and written in her father's shaking hand. It said simply, "Zara, I am dying, and I die a coward who does not deserve forgiveness. I traded my daughter for my son's safety, and I have regretted it every moment since. I thought I could live with the choice, but I cannot. Thomas never forgave me. I could never forgive myself. I hope you found safety. I hope you found happiness. I hope someday you can remember that I was not always this broken man. Your father, Edmund. Zara read it twice, then folded it carefully. She felt no anger anymore, only sadness for the man her father had become, for the fear and weakness that had driven him to such a terrible choice. "Are you all right?" Yates asked softly. "Yes," Zara said, and she meant it. "He was a broken man who made a terrible choice, but that choice led me to you, to this life. I cannot find it in myself to regret the path that brought me here, even though the beginning was dark." "What about Thomas?" "He stays with us," Zara said firmly. "He is my brother, and this is his home now." Yates nodded. "Then he is my brother too." Thomas became part of the Hammond family as naturally as breathing. He worked on the ranch alongside Yates, learning to be a cowboy, learning to be a man from someone who embodied honor and integrity. He doted on his nephew John, playing with him for hours and making the baby laugh with his silly faces. In the evenings, the family gathered on the porch, watching the Arizona sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Zara would hold John while Yates and Thomas talked about the day's work, and she would feel a contentment so deep it was almost painful. 2 years later, Zara gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Grace, who arrived early one May morning with hardly any warning. Yates barely had time to fetch the midwife before the first baby was born, and the second followed minutes later. Twins. He laughed, looking slightly overwhelmed as he held one tiny daughter while Zara nursed the other. "We are going to need a bigger house." They did build onto the house, adding rooms and space for their growing family. Thomas, now 14, helped with the construction, proving himself strong and capable. The ranch prospered under Yates's careful management and Zara's financial acumen. They added more cattle, bought more land, became one of the most successful ranches in the territory. But success, Zara learned, was not measured in acres or head of cattle. It was measured in moments. It was Thomas teaching John to ride his first horse. It was Yates singing lullabies to the twins in his off-key voice. It was family dinners filled with laughter and stories. It was lying in bed with her husband, talking about dreams and plans and the beautiful ordinary details of life. One summer evening, when John was 4 and the twins were 2, Zara stood in the garden picking tomatoes for dinner. Yates came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About that day in the mountains," Zara said. "About how I thought my life was ending and it was actually beginning. Do you ever regret it?" "The hard part's the pain." Zara turned in his arms and looked up at his face, the face she loved more than anything in the world. "Never. Not for a single moment. You gave me back my life, Yates. You gave me back myself. And then you gave me this beautiful family, this beautiful home. I am the luckiest woman alive." "I think I am the lucky one," Yates said, and kissed her under the Arizona sky. Years passed in a steady stream of seasons and milestones. John grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books as much as ranching. The twins were wild and joyful, always covered in dirt and full of mischief. Thomas became a man, falling in love with a girl from town named Sarah, and marrying her in the same church where Yates and Zara had wed. They built a house on the far side of the ranch property and started their own family. When John was 8, Zara gave birth to another son, whom they named William. He came into the world with a lusty cry and his father's blue eyes, and Zara marveled again at the miracle of new life, at the way love could multiply rather than divide. The children grew and flourished. The ranch continued to prosper. Zara and Yates grew older together, their hair streaked with gray, their faces lined with years of sun and laughter. But the love between them never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year. deepened by shared experiences and mutual respect, and the thousand small kindnesses that make up a life together. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Yates took Zara back to the spot where he had first brought her to the ranch, the rise overlooking the valley where the house sat nestled among the trees. "You remember what I promised you that first day?" he asked. "You promised me fair wages, my own room, and respect," Zara said, smiling at the memory. "And did I keep that promise?" "You kept it for exactly 1 day," Zara said. "And then you gave me so much more. You gave me love, partnership, family, purpose. You gave me a reason to believe in goodness again." Yates took her hand, his touch still sending warmth through her after all these years. "You saved me too, you know. I was just going through the motions before you came. You gave me something to live for beyond just survival." They stood together looking at the ranch, at the house where their children had been born and raised, at the land they had worked together to build into something lasting and good. "We made something beautiful," Zara said softly. "We did," Yates agreed. "And we are not done yet." He was right. There were more years ahead, more grandchildren to spoil, more sunsets to watch, more quiet moments of connection. There were challenges too, droughts and hard winters and the inevitable losses that come with living. But they faced everything together, hand in hand, heart to heart. When Zara was 50, she received a letter from California. It was from a lawyer handling an estate. Inside was a small daguerreotype of her mother, the only photograph that had ever been taken of her. Apparently it had been found among Edmund's possessions, and the lawyer had finally tracked down Zara to return it. She held the small image, looking at her mother's face for the first time in decades. Catherine Morgan looked back at her with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "She would be proud of you," Yates said, looking over her shoulder. "I hope so," Zara said. "I hope she knows that I found my way to happiness despite everything." That evening she placed the daguerreotype on the mantel next to photographs of their own family. Past and present, pain and joy, all woven together into the tapestry of a life well lived. On a warm spring day when Zara was 62, she sat on the porch in a rocking chair, watching her grandchildren play in the yard. There were 7 of them now, ranging from toddlers to teenagers, all loud and energetic and full of life. Yates sat beside her in his own rocker, his hand clasped in hers. John and his wife lived in town where he practiced law, but they visited often. The twins had both married ranchers and lived nearby with their families. William was running the Hammond ranch now, capable and hardworking like his father. Thomas's children were grown, with children of their own. "We did good," Yates said, his voice still strong despite his 67 years. "We did better than good," Zara corrected. "We built a legacy of love." She thought about that terrified girl who had been traded away by her father, who had thought her life was over at 20 years old. She thought about the cowboy who had bought her back, who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself. She thought about every moment between then and now, the joys and sorrows, the ordinary days and the extraordinary ones. "Thank you," she said to Yates, as she had said countless times over the years. "For what?" he asked, as he always did. "For seeing me, for choosing me, for loving me." Yates raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for every single day." The grandchildren's laughter rang out across the yard. The Arizona sun painted everything in golden light. The mountains stood eternal in the distance, the same mountains that had witnessed the beginning of their story so many years ago. Zara closed her eyes and breathed in deeply, savoring the moment. She thought about fate and choice, about the terrible things that happen and the beautiful things that can grow from them. She thought about her father's desperate decision and how it had led her to exactly where she needed to be. She did not forgive Edmund Morgan for what he had done. Forgiveness felt too much like excusing the inexcusable. But she had made peace with it, had found a way to carry that painful beginning without letting it poison the joy of everything that came after. Because the truth was this: her father had traded her for safe passage through the mountains. A cowboy had found her and bought her back, and in doing so, Yates Hammond had given her everything she never knew she needed. He had given her a home, a family, a purpose. He had given her love in its truest, most enduring form. They had built a life together from nothing, two people who had suffered loss and found each other in the aftermath. They had raised children and built a thriving ranch and created a legacy that would outlast them both. They had loved each other through the easy times and the hard times, through sickness and health, through joy and sorrow. That evening, after the grandchildren had been taken home and the house was quiet, Zara and Yates lay in bed together. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Yates replied, his voice warm and certain. "Always have, always will." Zara smiled and let herself drift toward sleep, secure in the knowledge that she was loved, that she was valued, that she mattered. The girl who had been traded away had become a woman who was treasured. The victim had become a survivor, and then something more than that. She had become herself, fully and completely, in all her strength and vulnerability and capacity for love. The Hammond Ranch would continue for generations. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren would work the land and tell the story of how it all began. Of the grandmother who had survived the unthinkable, and the grandfather who had loved her back to wholeness. But on that quiet night, in that comfortable bed, with Yates's arms around her and the sound of the creek outside their window, Zara simply felt grateful. Grateful for the journey, grateful for the destination, grateful for every moment of the beautiful, imperfect, extraordinary life they had built together. Outside, the Arizona stars blazed in an endless sky. The mountains stood sentinel over the valley. The ranch slept peacefully, full of life and hope and the promise of tomorrow. And inside the adobe house with the covered porch, Zara Morgan Hammond drifted into dreams, held safe in the arms of the cowboy who had given her back her freedom and then won her heart. She dreamed of sunshine and grandchildren, of wide open spaces and home-cooked meals, of laughter echoing through generations. She dreamed of love, pure and simple and true. She dreamed of happily ever after, and when she woke in the morning to Yates's kiss on her forehead and his whispered good morning, she knew that the dream was real. It was her life, hard-won and deeply cherished, built from courage and compassion, and an unwavering commitment to choosing love even when the world seemed dark. The story that had begun in fear and abandonment had transformed into something beautiful. And in the end, that transformation was the greatest victory of all. Not just survival, but thriving. Not just enduring, but flourishing. Not just existing, but truly, deeply, joyfully living. This was the legacy of Zara and Yates Hammond, written not in words but in the lives they touched, the family they raised, and the love that sustained them through 4 decades of marriage and beyond. This was the proof that even from the deepest darkness, light could emerge. That even from betrayal, trust could be rebuilt. That even from despair, hope could blossom. And when their time on earth finally ended, many years later, they were laid to rest side by side in the cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch. Their headstone was simple, bearing their names and dates and a single inscription chosen by their children. Together always, in this life and the next. The Hammond Ranch continued to prosper under William's stewardship and eventually his sons. The family grew and spread, but they always came back to that valley in Arizona, to the house that Zara and Yates had built, to the land that represented everything they had fought for and believed in. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun set in brilliant colors over the mountains, the grandchildren and great-grandchildren would gather on that covered porch and ask to hear the story again. The story of how their grandmother had been traded away, how their grandfather had bought her back, and how that terrible beginning had led to a love story that spanned decades and touched generations. The story was told and retold, becoming family legend, and with each telling, the message remained the same. That love is stronger than fear, that hope can survive even the darkest moments, and that sometimes the worst thing that happens to us leads us exactly where we are meant to be. Zara's journey from victim to survivor to beloved matriarch was complete. She had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would endure long after her time on earth was finished. She had mattered to someone, many someones, not as a burden or a bargaining chip, but as a person of infinite worth and value. In the end, that was everything she had wanted on that evening so long ago when she sat on the porch with Yates and told him her dreams. She had achieved it all and more, building a life of meaning and purpose from the ashes of abandonment. This was her story, and it was a good one. It was a story of resilience and redemption, of love conquering fear, of two people finding each other against impossible odds and choosing to build something beautiful together. It was, in every sense, a happily ever after.